Hi, and welcome to another Shane Plays Out of the Abyss Notes series as my intrepid party of adventurers continues their quest and series of adventures through the Out of the Abyss Underdark adventure for 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons. We've been in the Whorlstone Tunnels underneath Gracklstugh for several sessions. I think this is the third session now, actually, and they're still exploring. As I felt when we were going in that this was going to take a few sessions because we play at 2 hours at a pop once a week. Um, and I actually missed a couple weeks ago and had to fill in one-off adventure. One of my players ran for them, so we're probably going to be in the Whorlstone Tunnels for a few more sessions, which is okay because they seem to be having fun with it. It's it's basically a bit of a dungeon crawl underneath Gracklstugh. So it's a miniature dungeon within the huge dungeon that is the Underdark, and they seem to be having fun with it. There's a lot of little areas, and there's a couple of different factions that are in the Whorlstone Tunnels. One would be these crazy Darrow cultists, which they haven't run into yet, and the other would be the Grey Ghost, which is the Gracklstugh Thieves Guild, which they have encountered and had a battle with. So not the entire guild, but partial. So they ran into a few of them at the end of last session. They had there was this area. I think it's section 7 and 8 in the Whorlstone Tunnels, where they have this. They farm fungi and use it to make things like uh, uh, different. No, what's the word I'm looking for? Like acid and alchemist fire and everything. They have an alchemist, or they had until the party killed him. That they had these Darrow cultivating the fungus, and then the alchemist was making things, I guess, for the Thieves Guild to sell and trade. Uh, so at the end of last session, they had just finished a fight with three Duargar that were tending the fungi, and then the alchemists had got in the mix, and it actually proved to be an interesting fight on their behalf. Um, and they did finish that fight. It was a little bit more of a challenge than I expected, but hey, that happens, and it was actually kind of good. Gave them a little bit of challenge. They just didn't steamroll through. And part of that was because of the tactics that the Duargar used. And if you want to know more about that, go watch the previous video. Kind of go into that, and I used the tactics that the book suggested. Um, so what they did, I mean, literally, we picked right up. The fight was just over. Um, and what they ended up doing was exploring the rest of the area. So you have this like fungi farm, little pit that has all kinds of fungus in it, and then there were some crates. Most of them were empty, but some of them had some cultivated fungus that could actually be used for food and rations and could be sold. I think it was either each crate was like worth 25 or 50 gold pieces. So the good news is, and I had Eldith, who was, the dwarf scout that's with them as an NPC. I had her roll a survival, and she didn't do really well. She's like, I know this is worth something, but I don't know how much. Uh, you know, but so they're like, oh, okay. So the good news is this stuff could be worth something. The bad news is I think each crate's like worth 50 pounds. So they wisely decided to maybe circle back. And at one point towards the end of the session, I've got two wizards in the group, and one of the wizards was like, well, I'll just make Tensor's floating disc and we'll carry some of this stuff. And somebody else kind of pointed out, it's like, well, that only lasts for an hour. So um, there you go. Sometimes the harsh realities, even in a game world, set in. Now, on a couple of notes, one of my main players, who's like always there, had let me know ahead of time that he probably wouldn't be there, and in fact he did not show up. So what I did was, he's a monk, and he's one of their main melee, one of their really only main melee characters. The, when the paladin got killed by the dragon a few sessions ago, the player rolled up a wizard, knowing that they were deficient in melee, but that was his choice. I'm not going to tell him what character he has to make. But he even mentioned, he's like, oh, we're kind of short on melee. And I'm like, okay, well, if you want to make a wizard, that's cool. I mean, it's up to you. I'm not going to tell you what you have to play. I do try to um, encourage the players to think of the group as a whole. when they do things, but I don't force their hand. I think it would have been better if that character or that player had rolled up a more melee character, given the dangerous nature of the Underdark. But again, I'm not going to force their hands. Uh, so anyway, what I did was Daggers, the blind rogue, that player. I said, hey, do you want to play Eldith as as an active character in this session? And he said, yeah. So he played two characters. He played his regular Daggers, the blind rogue, who was raised in the circus, and then he also played Eldith. So I had these, and I've been linking these in the blog posts um, in the video notes on YouTube. There's a couple of very helpful links for the Gracklstugh section of Out of the Abyss that I found online, and those are linked, and one of them includes character stats for the NPCs. So I gave him those stats and said, well, you can run her. And, I said, I think we figured out she's got a short sword and like a chainmail shirt or something like that she's picked up over time. But other than that, stats are basically the same. I haven't been leveling up the NPCs like the characters have been leveling up. I guess I probably need to, especially at times like this. So I may sit down and do that at one point. But anyway, so usually what I do is I have Eldith as an NPC hang back and occasionally engage in combat, and she'll do survival rolls and occasionally make helpful suggestions, because I don't want the NPCs to dominate the action. I want the players to be the drivers of the action and the combat and all that. But in this case, since they were down a melee character, I went ahead and let him play Eldith. I guess in the future we could talk as a group. Hey, do you want to let somebody else play your character if you're not there that night? But I'll let the players decide that. Hopefully I'll remember to bring that up as a discussion point. So other than that, they kind of explored the area. They found, they went up to the alchemist area and they found the laboratory and all of that, and they found the chest that had potions and whatnot in it. And they did a long rest, so I went ahead and let them identify all the potions. There's some healing potions and potion of fire breath and potion of psychic resistance. And there was also, in the desk was actually kind of in a semi-important area to search, because you got, I ruled that Droki had already been through, because Droki had gone in and already left. They could tell by the tracks. So the holy symbol wasn't there. That was Droki's payment, but the black lump of metal was there. And there was also scraps of paper with recipes written in Dwarvish where you could make alchemist fire and acid, I think. And then also there was a hidden drawer that had a note that related to another quest that the captain of the guard that they haven't encountered. I don't know if they're going to while they're in Gracklstugh, but he gives a quest, or is it she? I can't remember. I have to go look up. That note is proof for that quest, so they could get experience points if they do that quest. I really felt they dropped the ball on searching this area. Now, one character did get very interested in the herbalism aspect of it and checked out the laboratory part of it. And the book says, well, you can make herbalism kits and a poisoner's kit and some healer's kits and da-da-da. So because she checked that out and had sort of an herbalist background already, I said, you can do all this stuff if you want. So she made a few kits. But the desk was, the necromancer, Melkor, the half-orc necromancer, is the only one who really checked. Even though I mentioned the desk several times, I try not to just beat people over the head and say, hey, you should do this. See if I can raise my chair up and say, hey, you should do this. But at the same time, I will mention things a couple of times in case they didn't catch it, and they just didn't. Only the necromancer checked it out. And he was like, oh, and he saw the scraps with a foreign language on it because he didn't read it, and he just hit it. Said, this is mine, took it, didn't tell anybody, acted very roguelike. Completely ignored the lump of black metal, even though I mentioned a couple of times, and that comes into play later with some of the stuff that the Thieves Guild's doing. So I didn't say anything. I mean, let the party do what they want, but I really felt they dropped the ball. They didn't seem to be on their A game as far as checking out the room. And there's an associated where you go down this little ledge into a lower level of the room, and there's a barred door that has a little peephole you look through. And they look through that and so, oh, it's kind of an empty room with a ladder going up. Uh, and they just left it barred. And then they went out. There's double doors leading to this area from the main Whorlstone complex. And so they spiked that and kind of tried to keep that closed, put an alarm on it, spell. And then they took a long rest. And after, they got their spells back and hit points and all that, and checked out magic items and made stuff and did all that, which is fine. And it was the first long rest that they had taken in the Whorlstone Tunnels. So that advanced the day count forward one. So now they've been in Gracklstugh 4 days, and that advanced the pursuit level to 5, the ongoing pursuit level. So if they get to 6, which is probably going to happen, then Elvira catches up to them. So I'm really contemplating when they get out of the Whorlstone Tunnels and make it back to the inn, that there may be some sort of encounter with Elvira. But I think there's definitely going to be an encounter with Elvira before they leave Gracklstugh. Maybe I'll use that as the impetus or whatever to get them out of Gracklstugh when I feel like they've been there too long and need, because there's a lot going on with the Out of the Abyss. There's so much more. We'll be here for a long time at 2 hours a clip. I may try to occasionally have a, hey, do you guys want to meet on Saturday and have a longer session every now, maybe once a quarter or something like that to help move things forward. Or we may do I don't know. I'm just not going to put time on that right now. They have a larger adventuring guild called the Vanguard of the Eye, so maybe some of those characters who aren't being played for a while, because these other characters are Out of the Abyss, maybe we could have a one-off adventure every now and then just to keep that going. But anyway, so they did their long rest, and they came darn close to just leaving, going back into the Whorlstone Tunnels without opening up that barred door with the little peephole, and going in there and checking out that ladder, which blew my mind. But they finally decided to go in there, and that blew my mind that they didn't want to go check it out. I think they felt that it was barred to keep danger from out there from coming in. But the peephole to me was a pretty big, people traffic through this area. But anyway, and one of the characters, when they were debating whether or not to go check out that room that was connected that had the ladder going up, was even like, where's the bones out there if it's so dangerous? Because it said it was empty. And so that character, Daggers, was, had cottoned on to the fact that we should go check this out. Anyway, they finally did. And it leads you to this tunnel. You go up a ladder like 60 feet and go through a trapdoor and go through some tunnels. And you end up popping out at a pipe with loose bars that lead you right to the Dark Lake District and the docks, very close to the Blade Bazaar and the inn. So they finally checked that out. And this is one of those times where I fudged as a DM, because there's a tripwire when you're removing the bars. I think it takes a DC 14 to notice it. And 3 different characters checked, and one had a 12 and 2 had an 11, and I just fudged it and said, well, you're all working together, and you just happen to notice this tripwire that you would have, you almost didn't catch it. And so they were like, trying to follow the wire, and I said, well, it just kind of goes off into the pipe. You can't tell what it is, but what it is, it's just an alarm that that will alert the Thieves Guild, the Grey Ghost, in the Whorlstone Caverns if somebody's coming through. So they were able to disable that through a normal dexterity check with thieves tools. Popped out and they realized where they were. Like, wow, great, this is really great. Here's a little entrance, da da da. And then they promptly went back into the Whorlstone Tunnels, which is fine, nothing wrong with that. I'm glad they found it. I was a little bit distraught that they almost didn't go that way as a DM. I'm like, hey, this is cool. You want to find this. But at the same time, I don't want to twist their arms. I don't want to force them into doing stuff. And then they ended up going the way they tried to find Droki's trail. They couldn't. By pure happen chance, they went up and went the direction he went. Now, it kind of going north in the tunnels, leaving the double doors that led into area 7 and 8. You come into this area that has a pool of foul water in it, and there's a ramp going up, and then there's a path kind of going around. So you can either go east and stay on the level with the water and kind of go under the ramp that goes up to the west. And by the book, Droki can be seen there inching his way along the eastern path level with the water. But I had to go, you know what? They took a long rest. And then they explored. So Droki's like 10 hours ahead or something like that. So I'm thinking Droki's not even in the caverns anymore. I may have them catch up with Droki at some point. Because narratively, I can override common sense. I can say, well, Droki's still in there. Who knows why he would still be in there. But I couldn't think of a good reason why he would just be immediately up the path 10 hours later. So what I did is the character that used stealth and went ahead, I said, and I didn't tell him why. I said, tell me odd or even and roll a d6. He said odd and he rolled even. So I ruled that Droki wasn't there. If he would have rolled odd and had said odd, then I would have ruled that Droki was there inching along the east one. Even though that doesn't make a lot of common sense, it's still a game. It doesn't have to make sense. But anyway, so Droki wasn't there. And they decided to take the western ramp up. Long story short, by the book, there's a big water weird that erupts out of the water, and they get into a fight. They did pretty good fighting the water weird. The wizard, I have two wizards. The elf wizard, there's the replacement character for the paladin that got killed by the dragon, did get grappled and dropped into the water by the water weird. And then one character, the necromancer, who's played by younger players, like 12 or 13, he's always trying to play, hey, how does this work? Hey, he always tries to do unusual things, which is fine. I mean, he's trying to figure out how the game works and what he can do. He used alter self, and turned himself kind of like Abe Sapien from Hellboy, kind of a fish man, and jumped into the water, hoping to distract the water weird. And then they killed the water weird. So that's kind of how that went. Now, I did, because it's foul water, and this foul water, if you drink it, you have to do a DC 12 Constitution check, or else you're poisoned. In once an hour, you can try to be unpoisoned with another check. I had them both roll, because the character that got enveloped and grappled and dropped into the water, and then was kind of swimming out, and then the fish guy who jumped in, I had them both roll DC 12 Constitution checks, and they passed, so they did not get poisoned by the foul water. But I did say, you notice this water is really foul, and come to think of it, all the standing water that you've seen in this area, in these Whorlstone Tunnels, has been foul. And now they don't know they're called the Whorlstone Tunnels, but I think I've let that slip a couple times. Probably not a big deal. So that's basically what we got to last night. They fought the water weird. They're heading up the western ramp, and the water weird was set there to protect people. Somebody put that water weird there and put a order on it. Don't let people go up this ramp. So they're going to continue to go up there. Now, other interesting things that happened in this most recent session. I don't know if I can't remember if I pointed this out last time, but one of my characters, Tom, who's probably my oldest player, has a lot of experience with D&D, creative guy. He's the one that did the haiku from last, or Serena, or whatever you call it, haiku that is not dealing with nature. He got these little stencils. They're multicolored. There's a whole bunch of them. And so now I hand these out when somebody has inspiration. So here you go. And so they have something in front of them, and and they hand it back to me when they use their inspiration. That's a good way to remember that they have inspiration. And the way I do inspiration is if you don't use it in that session, you lose it. So at the end of the night, I collect these back up. But that's very handy. Good idea on Tom's behalf. It's just really handy with inspiration to remember that you have it. It's almost like currency. I'm giving you, and then you give it back to me. So, and it's a reminder, this colorful reminder setting right in front of you that you have inspiration. Tom also has, he has these little plastic flutes that he lays next to the miniatures on the map when he gives them bardic inspiration. So the flute for bardic, I thought that was kind of clever. He's very clever. He has little insults written up ahead of time for his psychic taunt, his bardic, what's it called? Mockery, vicious mockery, I think, which is a great little cantrip or spell or whatever. Try to think what else. My Melkor, the half-orc necromancer, people were referring to him as a wizard, and he's like, I'm not a wizard, I'm a necromancer. And we were like, well, technically you're a wizard, but anyway. And then he also said, "Hey, can I, if I, because he was working on his backstory last night. And he's like, if my backstory can affect my character, right?" And I said, "Absolutely." And he said, "Okay, well, I've determined that my family was killed by vampires, so I want to be able to be really good at hunting vampires." I said, "Okay." I said, "Here's what I'll do with you, if you want." I said, "You can have advantage on any attacks against vampires." He's like, "Yeah." I said, "But you also have an overwhelming compulsion that you will attack any vampire on sight." And he went, "Okay, works for me." And I'm like, "Are you sure?" And he said, "Yep." I said, "Okay." And everyone's like, "Well, I don't know if I'd take that deal," but he's like, "Yeah, it works for me." I'm like, "Okay." So he seemed happy with that. If characters try to come up with cool stuff with their backstory, then I'll try to work with them on it. My player that's kind of the rules lawyer and always doing weird things with their character and charged the red dragon at second level and died because that's what their character would do, and those sort of things. Uh, Last session I mentioned that, he was really trying to I'm the first one to go in. I'm the one to search for traps. I'm this, I'm that, I'm the other. I finally last night, uh, one of my characters was another player was trying to stealth up and check out the alchemist area right after the fight with the Duergar in the funga farm. And he goes, "I go too." He's like, "I go too." And I shouldn't have done this. I should have done this separately or find a better way to do it. But I looked at him and I said, it's okay to let other people shine sometimes. It's okay. And he went, and he said, "Okay." And I shouldn't have done it that way. I mean, I think the point that I asked him to consider was valid, but I shouldn't have done that way. And I wasn't super jerky about it. I said, it's okay to let other people shine sometimes. But I shouldn't have done it in front of everybody else because that's potentially kind of an embarrassing thing to say to somebody in a group. And then the other player was like, "Yeah, I don't want you to go with me because the session before, if you both try to stealth together, the lower roll and da 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 da, and the character I was saying it's okay to let other people shine had messed up the stealth last time." So I was like, "Okay, I'll hang back." And so of course the bard who wanted to stealth forward rolled a 1 and fumbled on the stealth check after we made that big point. So I lost it and went over and laughed and leaned my head against the wall for a couple of minutes. And then I came back and I said, "That's just too ironic after, we made a big deal about you not stealthing forward." So I gave him an inspiration for being a good sport about it because he was a good sport about it. So, and he also came up after the game and he asked me, and I'd be interested in people's comments in the video on this, your opinion. He said, "Hey, can I there's a section in the Dungeon Master's Guide about making your own spells. And so I want to do this and that element and wanted to change the elemental nature of some of his spells." I said, "Well, I'm not saying no, but let me think about it." And I said, "Also I'm thinking you're in the Underdark and you don't have access to like laboratories and this and that and the other and other wizards to talk to really. So I don't, I'm kind of, I don't know." And then I said, "Well, show me in the Dungeon Master's Guide." So he showed me the section. It's a very short section, and it's really talking about if a dungeon master wants to make spells and offer them to the players. And I pointed that out to him. And I said, "I don't know. I'm not saying no, but let me think about it." I'm inclined to say no, because players just willy-nilly coming up with their own spells and changing spells isn't really a core ongoing normal thing in D&D, but at the same time I don't want to just say no out of hand, so I'm going to think about it. But he also pointed out, and this is kind of he's like, "Yeah, I wonder how when we level up, how are we even learning new spells? Because there's no like magic shops or other wizards and stuff like that around." And I said, "Well, it's a good point." And so I've got to think about how I want to address that in the Underdark. And there are larger cities that can come to. So I may just solve it that way or have them run into random NPCs that maybe could help them or something like that. But anyway, so that's how it went. We will continue in the Whorlstone Tunnels. Like I said, I'm sure for several sessions. Thanks so much for watching. Please leave a thumbs up, a like on YouTube, maybe a comment. That helps me out tremendously. And we will catch you next time on the Shane Plays Out of the Abyss Notes series. Thanks so much for watching.